Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer. My co-host is Holly Kane, and together we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. We're so glad you're here with us. Hi, friend. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, and today I'm joined by my friend, Jill McCormick. You might recognize Jill's name from a previous episode. She was actually one of our first guests on the podcast. And if you want to hear more about her leadership journey and how a type A driven leader can receive more grace, go back and listen to episode 7. I know you'll be encouraged by hearing her story. But today I invited Jill to be part of our goal setting series after she shared a blog post with me that she had written. Holly and I had already decided that we wanted to do an episode about how our personality affects our goal setting. And Jill's post was about this exact topic. So instead of just telling you about the blog post and sending you over to read it, I decided to invite Jill on to the podcast so that she could share all of her insight on this topic. So in case you are a new listener and you haven't heard the other goal setting episodes that we've done so far, I want to encourage you to go back and listen to a few different episodes. So episode 24 was all about reflecting on the past before setting your goals. And then in episode 26, Holly and I chat about the importance of dreaming and creating a vision for the future. And then last week's episode was episode 28, and that's where Holly and I got into some practical approaches to goal setting. And so as leaders, we know that goal setting is a part of our lives. It's something that we need to do, whether we're leading in a ministry role or in a corporate setting, running our own business, or even just keeping track of our household and managing our life. But we also know and recognize that we're all created uniquely and we're all wired differently. And so this can really impact how we perceive, set, and accomplish goals. And Holly and I have alluded to this a few times on some of these past episodes. And one of our desires here on the podcast is to give you resources and information that will help you to be the most effective leader possible and find ways to set goals based on how you're wired. So today we're going to continue with this goal setting series, and I'm excited to talk with Jill on the topic of how our personality affects our goal setting. So welcome, Jill, back to the podcast. I'm really excited to have you with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So before we jump in specifically with what Jill has to share, I want to just mention that there's a few different personality frameworks that someone might consider when they're starting to think about goal setting. One of them is the Meyers-Briggs, or 16 personalities. So I'm not really going to get into this one today. We have talked about this on a previous episode. I believe it was episode 8, where we talked a bit about this personality framework. But I will put some links in the show notes so that you can check out, if this is your preferred framework, you can check out some different articles that I found about how to approach goal setting based on your Meyers-Briggs type. And then another framework that you might be familiar with is the 4 Tendencies from Gretchen Rubin. And she wrote a book based on this idea of how people respond to expectations. And she talks about how you respond to inner expectations and outer expectations. And she breaks people down into 4 different categories for that. So when it comes down to it, goal setting has a lot to do with how we respond to expectations. So I think if that's something that's of interest to you, again, I'm going to put a couple links in the show notes so that you can check that out and see how you might approach goal setting based on her framework. So if you haven't guessed already, the framework that we're going to discuss on today's episode and how it relates to goal setting is the Enneagram. And if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you have probably heard us mention this one. And so if you need an overview of what the Enneagram is, because that's not the purpose of this episode, but if you want an overview of it, you can go back to episode 17 with Beth McCord. She gave us a really good overview of the Enneagram framework, and she went through the 9 different types in detail and how they operate. So I encourage you to listen to that if you haven't. We also did talk about it when Jill was on the podcast with me in episode 7, and it also came up in episode 11 with Jenny Catron. So you've got lots of resources if you just need more insight on what the Enneagram is. And those will all be linked up in the show notes. So Jill, now that I'm done explaining all the intro, let's jump into talking about how our personality affects our goal setting. So I'd love to start with you just sharing, why did you write this blog post? Like, how did it come about that you needed to share this information about goal setting and personality types?
So, right about this time of year in January, everyone is setting goals and they're talking about resolutions and plans for the next year. And I found I'm an Enneagram type 3, which is the achiever or the performer. And I would set very specific goals and I would diligently follow through and meet every single goal to the point of exhausting myself and the people I lived with in an attempt to meet every goal.
Right.
But I have friends of all different personality types. And I would have a friend say, well, I don't really set specific goals, but I do have a word of the year. Or I don't set goals at all. I just kind of take life as it comes. And I thought, I don't understand that. What? How do you go with the flow? That is a foreign concept to me. And I thought, okay, this must be because we're wired differently. And because I love the Enneagram so much, I thought there has to be something that connects our personality with our ability or inability or lack of desire to set goals. Why am I so laser focused? And I have friends who at the end of the year have done just as much as I have, but they have not been nearly as driven in their daily life. And so that led me to write this post.
Okay. Awesome. So why do you think it's important for us to understand our personality type when it comes to planning and setting goals for the year?
I believe from my experience and the experience of my friends as a woman and as a leader, I am always looking around at other people and saying, how did they handle this problem? Or what's their approach to this? Or how did they solve that situation? So I'm constantly looking and seeing other options. But what I end up doing is I start comparing myself to others. And I say, well, Esther, look at how, she's got these really high goals. I don't feel like my goals are that high. I should probably set goals as high as Esther's. Or I'll see a friend who doesn't set any goals and I'll say, oh, that just sounds lovely and amazing. And I should not set any goals. And then I find myself about February, like ready to crawl the walls because I feel like I have no direction in my life. And I think because we compare ourselves to others, we either try to meet what they're doing or turn into a version of them that is not at all us. And I think it's crucial, especially for women leaders, to understand we are all wired differently. And it's okay if Esther sets really high goals because that's what God has asked Esther to do. And my goal may look very different from her goal, and that is okay. So I think understanding how we're wired takes comparison out of the picture. And Jesus talks to us about comparison when he says, just don't do it.
Yeah.
And it's because he knows he's wired us differently and he has a customized plan for each and every one of us. But we get so caught up trying to catch up with somebody else that we're not following our own plan, which makes me laugh so hard because I have a very customized way I order my Starbucks chai tea latte. It borders on ridiculous. I want a customized coffee, but a customized life? No. I want to look like everybody else. And it's because of comparison. And so I think that understanding how we're wired takes comparison out of the picture.
Yeah. Okay. So important. And I think that is where a lot of us get tripped up when it comes to goal setting, is that we read a book or we listen to a podcast or we hear a method and we try to follow that method to a T. And it might not actually be a method that works with our personality type.
Yes.
And so we need to be willing to look at how we're wired and then find a way to set goals based on that instead of, like you said, comparing or just trying to fit into a cookie cutter system that may not be the right method for how you're wired.
Yes. And I think another thing outside of comparison is, like you said, you read a book or you listen to a podcast, and you say, oh, that's totally how I should do it. And it's not that there aren't best practices out there. Of course there are.
Yeah.
But when I've tried to find a system make it work for my life and it doesn't, I beat myself up. I say, well, I must not be doing this right. I must not be good enough. Why am I not smart enough to figure this out? And beating ourselves up does nothing in helping us achieve our goals. It only makes us feel more discouraged and more frustrated. So again, if we can figure out how we're wired and find a way that setting goals works for us, we take away the comparison and beating up our hearts that are trying to serve us, but we can't figure out why we can't get it together. And that's a false filter to live under. You are perfectly wired just how you are.
Yeah.
Let's live within those lanes.
Yes. Okay. So, what I'd love to do now is go through the types. You shared this on your blog post, so we're going to talk through it and talk through each personality type based on the Enneagram, how they view goal setting, and then maybe if you can share one or two tips for each type that would help them with their goal setting and how they could approach it. So,
Absolutely.
awesome. Okay, let's start with type 1.
Yes. And I want to disclaim before we get started that we're talking in generalities here.
Yes.
So this is a broad brush. So if you feel like, well, that fits, but that doesn't, that's okay. We're talking broad brush strokes here. So with the type 1, that is the perfectionist or the reformer. And Esther, I believe you are a type 1.
That is what I believe too.
My husband is a type 1. Type 1s are amazing people because they reflect when they're healthy, meaning they're in step with the Holy Spirit, not striving out of their own strength. They show us God's goodness and his rightness. But when they're unhealthy, type 1s can be very much default to rules and processes and procedures and checklists. So in terms of goals, type 1s are the type that love goals more than any other type of all the types. They are like moth to a flame. You cannot not set a goal because you love checklists and you love to-dos and you love marking it off and it feels amazing. But what ends up happening is when you set a goal and you reach it, you feel awesome. And you're like high-fiving yourself, this is great. But when you don't meet a goal, you beat yourself up. Or you can sometimes not meet a goal because you are researching so thoroughly how to perfectly meet the goal that you spend more time figuring out how to do it right, that you end up not doing it at all because to not do it perfectly is not okay. And also with type 1s, failure and imperfection are not an option. And so it has to be done and it has to be done right, which can leave you exhausted. So a couple of tips in terms of how to set goals in a very healthy way. I would recommend that you remember when it comes to setting these goals that these goals are probably stretch goals. Type 1s set very high goals and you've never been where you are trying to go. And so just to remember that you're a rookie in this, that you're a beginner, and to give yourself grace because it's just not going to be done perfectly. And I think another step would be to remember that Jesus gives you grace and compassion no matter what. And at the end of the day, his love for you is not dependent upon whether you reach that goal. So that would be my advice for the type 1. Does that ring true for you, Esther, as a type 1? Does that sound right?
It does. 100%. I was just thinking, okay, for all of you that are listening, Jill does not live in my home and she does not follow me around.
I do
But
not.
she did just describe my life. So one of the things that I have been doing this year, and I shared this on a previous episode, but I read John Acuff's book, Finish. And the thing that resonated with me so much was this concept of cutting your goals in half, which for a type 1 is like, no, that's a dumb idea, because
Yes.
why?
Why
Why would I do
settle
that?
for mediocre?
Right.
As if half
I
is
want to
mediocre.
make things 1000% better than they are right now.
Yes.
And I always have this idea that I'm going to be able to accomplish way more than I actually have the ability to do. And so I have actually been implementing that concept of cutting my goals in half, or at least like taking my goal and saying, okay, now that's an awesome goal, but Esther, what can you actually accomplish in the next week or in the next month? And scaling it back to something a little bit more reasonable.
Right.
And I just did that with my Fitbit and my steps. Like I went in and I changed my step goal to be lower than it had been, because I hadn't been hitting it and I want to hit it.
Yes.
So I changed it. And so now I've been hitting it every day, and it's totally a mental thing, but you get more excitement and more joy when you can hit the smaller goal, and then I'll increase it. But yes, type 1, that absolutely resonated with me.
Well,
So,
and I think really quickly, I think for perfectionists, you bristle against the term perfectionist because you think of it more as just doing it right, or having it done your way, or having it
yes.
go according to how it is in your head. And when someone tells you, well, is that realistic, or can you lower your expectation? There is a great deal of pushback because I want it to be right. Why are you telling me to make it not right?
Yeah.
And that's called extreme thinking, where your pendulum is swinging toward really high or nothing at all,
Yep.
because anything in the middle is unacceptable. And I think for the perfectionist, the reformer, trying to scale that back and learn that having less steps doesn't make you a failure or doesn't make it bad or not right. It just means you're moving towards your goal, but just at a different pace than you thought. And
Yep.
that's okay.
Yeah.
But that's hard to embrace.
It is. Okay, let's go on to type 2. What can you tell us about type 2s and how they approach goals?
So type 2s have almost the exact opposite reaction to goals as a type 1. So type 2s are the helper. They really show us God's compassion and his love and his care for us. But what happens with the type 2 is they love people so much that they often forget themselves. And so where type 2s run into problems is that they get so others focused, and all of us who aren't type 2s are like, I want to be more others focused. That sounds amazing. Like, doesn't Jesus call us to be more others focused? He does want us others focused, but not to neglect ourselves. So type 2s have a very hard time setting goals simply because they will drop whatever they're doing to go help another person. And sometimes this can turn into not as many boundaries. They have a hard time saying no. They believe they can come in and save whoever needs saving, or whatever program at church needs saving. Like if there is a need to help someone, they will step in and help. But the problem is that they neglect the gifts and the talents that God has given them and put into them to just be distracted by whatever next way to help other people might be. So, in
Mm,
terms of how to set a goal as a 2 and to meet it, one of my writer friends who's a type 2 says, what I do is I take my goal, and if I say it'll take me 4 weeks to accomplish this goal, well, I say I'm going to give myself 6 weeks to accomplish this goal, because I'm going to build in 2 weeks of time where maybe I go off and I help with this project, or I'm babysitting over here, or I've taken on helping someone over here. So that way they've got some white space where they don't feel as pressured to meet the goal in the time frame they quote unquote should meet the goal, because they've got extra built-in time, so they don't feel as much pressure. And I think another thing to remember is that for the type 2 who takes on a lot of responsibility, they feel like if someone is in need, it is their responsibility to help. To remember that God is our ultimate help. God is always at work in the universe, and you may not be the person who needs to fill that need. There are other billions of people on this planet, and God is working behind the scenes in ways we can't understand or imagine to help meet those needs. So you don't always have to be the helper.
Mm,
So that's the type 2.
okay. So good. And I'm actually a 1 with a 2 wing. So
Ah,
I can relate to some of the 2
yes.
stuff as well. And S.J. Meeson in episode 27 talked about this idea of sticking with what God has called you to and
Yes.
not trying to be all things to all people. So I loved what you just shared there too, because that really reminded me of what she said. We're all, as the body of Christ, we all have different roles. And
Right.
if one person tries to be all the roles, they're not going to be able to stay healthy.
Yep.
They're going to get burnt out.
Yep.
And I think sometimes twos might tend to do that, like you said, and they miss out on doing the one thing that God is asking them to do.
Well, and I know
So,
also to build on that point, I know for type 2, because they are so other centric, they would never want to hurt anybody. But if you think about taking on a role that isn't yours to take on, that means the person who's supposed to fill that doesn't get to do it. So you are invading their territory and their
mhm.
space. And I know type 2s, you don't want to do that. So before you commit to saying yes and getting sidetracked, talk to Jesus about, is this what I'm supposed to be taking on? Do I need to lay down what I'm currently working on to pick something new up, or do I need to allow someone else to step in and make this happen?
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So let's go to type 3, which I know is what you are, Jill. So you're going to have good insight on this one for sure.
Yes. Okay. So type 3s, similar to type 1s, we have a love-hate relationship with goals where we love coming up with them. We set very high goals. We can't imagine not reaching the goal because that's what you do. But when we perchance don't meet the goal, we beat ourselves up and we get extremely discouraged. And in order to meet a goal, we will work ourselves into exhaustion. So burnout is very real for the type 3, and that is not a healthy place to be. So
Right.
I would encourage you to not do that. So type 3s, here are some ways that you can set some healthy goals. One is to ask yourself, why? Why do I want to reach this goal? And I think that is an important question for type 3, because I hate to admit this, super embarrassing, but type 3s tend to be very image conscious. We want to impress everybody. We typically have on our game face, like we are unflappable. I
Mhm.
mean, we may be scrambling like squirrels on the inside, but you will never see it, because we want you to think we have it all together, that everything is perfect, that we do not need help of any sort, and everything's okay. So for the type 3, asking yourself why you want to do it is important, because some of the goals we set are very image conscious, not just how we look physically, but also how impressive we are. So if I set a goal, I am making this up. If I set a goal to lose 10 pounds, well, why do I want to do that? Well, so other people can think I look pretty. Well, why is that important? Well, because I want people to think I look pretty. Like, that seems so ridiculous, and it
Mhm.
is super embarrassing to say, but I think for the type 3s out there, you'll resonate with that, because we want everyone to think we're amazing. So we set goals that actually are not personally important to us. So we have to
Mm.
dig down and say, why? I think the I've read about the CEOs and those at Toyota will say, but why? And you just keep asking at least 5 whys until you get to the truth of what is going on. And I think another thing to do, again, because type 3s, we tend to be extroverts. We love to surround ourselves with people. We feed off the energy of people. And so I think spending time in solitude all by yourself with Jesus and say, God, what do you have in store for me this year? I'm not really sure. I need your help and direction, because if left to our own, we will kind of glom on to other people's expectations of us so we can be impressive to them by meeting those expectations. So we really need to spend a lot of time with our friend Jesus, asking what he wants for us and
Mm.
to live out through us. So that's
Awesome.
that's the type 3.
Type 3. Okay. So do you think that type 3s tend to be, I know you said they love people, but do you think that they, because of their drive, do they tend to kind of push forward regardless of people's feelings in terms of being able to reach a goal. So I'm just thinking about in a team setting, if a
Yes.
type 3 is a leader, are they going to need to be aware of how the goal is affecting the whole team? Or are they, I guess I'm just curious what you think about that.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up because that is a major component of the type 3. So type 3s, the goal is the ultimate. The
Yeah.
goal reigns supreme. People are either helpers in reaching that goal or they are interruptions and barriers.
Okay.
And so type 3s, if they're not, and I'm talking about when we're unhealthy, when we're not in step with the Holy Spirit, we view people as distractions and things to either move out of the way or bring onto our team to get us to move together. And so we can easily, type 3s are really not in touch with our feelings because we're task oriented. We put tasks before people. So we don't see, wow, Susie seems to be really sad in her cubicle over there. Because I'm making her work 12 hours to meet this goal. She hasn't seen her family in a week, and neither have I, but that's okay because the goal will be met. And so I think it's really, type 30s really have to, and this is hard, try to tap into what we're feeling and then to notice the emotions of the people around us. And how is this impacting the team? Is this healthy? And again, that goes back to why. Why have I set this goal? Is it because
Yeah.
I think it will bring me some sort of recognition or appreciation, or because I quote unquote should do it? Again, type 3s really want to meet expectations because we want to be impressive to other people. And so we need to dial back. Why is it important that I do whatever it is I'm doing?
Okay. Okay, great. All right, let's jump into type 4 and talk about how type 4s approach the whole issue of goals.
So I am a 3 wing 4, which means when I'm not being a 3, I am a 4. And your co-host, Holly,
Yep.
is also a 4. The
Yes.
4s are called the Individualist, and 4s reflect God's creativity. They are creative and passionate and feeling all your feelings people. So this is a true story that happened to me this fall. Again, super embarrassing. So my husband and I both work from home, and he's a type 1. And I walk into his office and I am wearing jeans from college, which in the mid 90s meant women were wearing men's baggy Levi's. I'm wearing baggy Levi's that have paint stains from painting like sandwich boards for college organizations. I had this loose t-shirt on, and I walk in and my shoulders are all slouched. And I said, "This is how I feel. And I feel like not doing anything. I don't feel like it." I mean, I literally said it in that voice. And he said, "Do you have stuff to do today? Is there stuff on your planner?" "Yes, but I don't want to do it." And he said, "I think you need to figure out a way to want to do it." And I was like, "You are right." Because for the type 4, our goals, if we set goals at all, they're very overarching, romantic thoughts of how life could be.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing, and it's wonderful and it's beautiful, and we get really excited, and we'll start out with really high expectations for how this will pan out. And then there is a moment where the emotions set in, where it's hard, or we've had a bad day, or our kids aren't doing well, and and type 4s will lose that emotional motivation, and they dip into the apathetic, discouraged side. And so they'll start really high on a roller coaster and they'll plunge, and then they'll have to figure out a way to either motivate themselves back to reach that goal, or they'll drop that goal completely and pick a new goal. Because again, they're very, very creative. They can churn out a ton of ideas, and
Mm,
they'll just move on to the next thing. So they are very much bound by emotion and how they quote unquote feel about doing a particular thing.
yeah.
So I think a healthy habit for a type 4 would be, first of all, talk to Jesus about what goals you need to set, because then when you do get discouraged and you do get frustrated, you'll come back to, nope, but I predetermined. I've helped my future self by pre-picking this thing, and I'm going to follow it through regardless of how I feel about it. And then I think another thing is to remember, in Christ we lack nothing. So we may lack that motivation in the moment, but if we ask our good shepherd to help us out, he will give us what we need to make it through and just take the next step. I think for type fours, it's very easy to get overwhelmed with the whole big goal. And so just taking those small steps. And I believe it was in episode 28 when Holly talked about the 12-week year. And it
Yes.
was helpful to her to not have 365 days of goals, but to have 12 weeks because she could break it down into smaller chunks.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing that I have seen about fours in my life is that they're not super big fans of structure and
Correct.
having a really scheduled or rigid routines.
Yes.
And so for goal setting, sometimes that can be tricky. And I've tried to figure this out is how do you set a goal without creating some kind of structure or routine? Because I like structure and rigid goals.
You need a system to know if you're making progress. How
Yeah. But I think, like you said, what she shared was she found something that works for her and a system. So for a type 4, if you're listening, I think what Jill shared, but also think about what's going to help you stay on track. Like, I think the type 4s that I know have a hard time staying on track with one thing. And the other thing I think that you shared about type 3 would also apply to type 4 is asking, why is this my goal? And going back to, is this something that truly matters in my life, or is it just a fun idea that I came up with one day when I was daydreaming about the future?
Yes. And I think also for the type 4s, I think having a friend or a mentor, someone you're not married to probably would be helpful, who can call you out and who can say, well, how are you doing on that goal? Even if you don't have a Excel spreadsheet that's holding you accountable, you have a person who's holding you accountable.
Yes.
Would be helpful.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. So let's talk about type 5s. How do type 5s look at goals and what can they do to approach goal setting in a healthy way?
So type 5s are the investigators, and when they are healthy, when they are in lockstep with the Holy Spirit, they show God's wisdom. But their default is over-analysis and analysis paralysis. These are very cerebral people who stay in their own head. They do a lot of research. But having said all that, their relationship with goals is probably the most healthy of all of the 9 Enneagram types. So they will research a goal to make sure it's realistic, that they can measure it, that it's achievable. Like they naturally gravitate to that SMART goal model that y'all mentioned in episode 28. They really get that. And they're even okay with stretching themselves a little bit to do a stretch goal, which is something else you talked about. But they greatly fear being incompetent and incapable. So they're not going to be your big goal setters like, I will launch a business that brings in 6 figures in 12 months. That's not your type 5. They'll say, I'm going to launch a business, but I hope it makes 3 figures the first month. And then maybe 3 more figures the second month, and we'll grow from there. So type 3s really are great goal setters. But again, when they're unhealthy, they can research a goal to death and they will make 0 progress on a goal because they're so busy researching it. And then they'll get tired of researching it. And then they'll get motivated again. And then they realize by the time they picked the goal back up, there are 4 new ways to accomplish this goal that have been added since they researched it 3 months before. And so they get trapped in this continual research. So I think some healthy habits for type 5 would be to trust your gut. Like, do the research. I am not saying don't research. I'm pro research. Do the research, but give yourself a time limit and say, I'm going to research this for 2 weeks. And then after that, I'm picking a plan, and that's the plan that I'm going to go with, because they could research pretty much indefinitely if they don't give themselves some sort of end date. And I think remembering that Jesus is always going to give you what you need. There is an abundance with Christ. Type 5s can very much suffer from a scarcity mentality, that if they don't have the answers, they're unimportant. And just to know you're going to do the best research that you can, but God has given you intuition and a gut feeling, and that he's going to give you whatever you feel like you lack. So I think for the type 5s, research, just maybe not to death.
Yeah. Yeah.
Start doing what you've
Start doing.
researched.
And I think my sister is a type 5, so I know we've talked a lot, and she loves goals. But you're right. I think she has told me, like, she can just spend so much time learning. She loves to learn. So you
Yes.
can learn so much about the thing that you want to do that you never
Yes.
actually do the thing.
Yes.
And
You know a lot about the thing, but you've just never
right.
done it.
Yeah. So I love the idea of setting a time limit. I can learn about this thing until X date, and then I'm going to start doing the thing.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I think the
Okay.
research is kind of a coping mechanism to make them feel safe. Like, if I
Yeah.
keep researching, I don't actually have to do it, because the doing is scary and the
Right.
research feels safe and comfortable to me. So
Yeah.
don't let that fear stop you. Stop the research and then go do the thing.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. So let's talk about type 6. What can you tell us about type 6s and the goals?
So type 6s are the loyalist. When they're healthy, they reflect God's faithfulness. But again, their default is fear. They really crave security and systems. This type is your type that will have contingency plan A, B, C, D, all the way to Z. They feel like if they can plan enough, nothing bad will happen, because they've got a plan and they will follow the rules. They're also very big rule followers. So what happens with the type 6 is they have a ton of ideas. They're very creative people, but they fear actually doing the idea. Or when they finally pick a goal, especially if you're a 6 with a 5 wing and you've researched and you've researched and you've researched, they finally pick a goal. Well, if they start losing momentum, or if it's not going how they planned, then they'll just pick a new goal and they'll drop that one and they'll move on to the next thing. So I think also, when a type 6, when they're in stress, they divert themselves to behaving more like a type 3, which is me, the achiever, the performer. And so they will work themselves to death, and they'll suffer exhaustion and burnout from trying to reach a goal, because that goal is so important to them, because they feel like it might bring them safety and security to reach the goal. And so they continue to work
Mm,
and they should be going to bed, or
yeah.
they should stop for just a minute and go outside and get some fresh air.
Mm,
So they very much are exhausted goal setters. But I
okay.
think in terms of some healthy habits, I think, again, like the type 5 or the type 4 also, is to take that big goal that you have and break it down into smaller chunks where it seems more manageable. And this week I'm going to do this, or today I'm going to do this. And then I think also remembering that the Holy Spirit is with you throughout all of this. It's not having a plan that brings you safety. It's not following the rules that brings you security. It is knowing that Christ is with you. And even if you fail, he loves you. He is for you. He is with you.
Yeah. Okay. So good. All right. So let's go to type 7. How do type 7s look at goals, and what can they do to create healthy habits?
All right. So type 7s, when they are healthy, they reflect God's joy. When they are unhealthy, they are busy for the sake of busy. So the modus operandi of the type 7 is to have fun, stay busy, avoid pain. And so they tend to not set goals so much as, and this is a good thing, what I'm about to say, is they have a very strong value system in place. They are very much in tune with what they value and who they are. So they would not say, oh yeah, I set 3 goals this year in these 3 categories. They would say, I picked a word of the year, or I am focusing on love for this season. And that is, I mean, that's great. Like that,
Mhm.
that is not a
Yeah.
bad thing. Um, But if they do set a goal, if they decide I will set a goal, what will end up happening is because sevens value their freedom so much, they don't want to be trapped or locked in. These might be your friends who, if you say, hey, can we go out to dinner on Friday? They'll say, can I get back to you on Thursday night? Because they just want to hedge their bets.
Something more fun might come up.
Something else more fun than you or me might come up, and they don't want to be trapped and say yes to a thing. They're very hesitant to commit.
Okay.
And so, and I say this, my best friend is a 7 and she is fabulous, but she chases the fun. She is all about the joy, and it is awesome. As a type 3 who is chasing the productivity and efficiency, I wish I could chase the joy a little bit more like she does, but that's not how I'm wired. So all of that to say that if a type 7 who chases the joy and does not like to be restricted, does not like to commit, they might feel pressured and feel really heavy when it comes to goal setting, where they feel like it's a jacket that they cannot take off and it feels like it's suffocating to them. So I think for type 7, maybe you don't set goals, but maybe you set intentions. Maybe you set a word of the year or a phrase of the year. Maybe you write a manifesto like, I am kind, I am loving, I am a good mom. And you can come back to those things to guide you. But again, I think because another healthy habit might be outside of set a word for the year, I think another healthy habit would be it's okay to experience the pain and the hurt as long as you are bringing that to the foot of Christ. Because doing things, setting goals in an attempt to insulate yourself from experiencing loss or hurt, it does not work. It wears you out, and it can wear out the people in your family because you're like, well, as a family, we're going to go on this number of vacations or this many, family nights or blah, blah, blah. They're like, oh my goodness, we just want to sit at home and watch a show. And the type 7s are go, 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 going. And that may be exhausting to other personality types in their house. So just remember, it's okay to experience the pain, but tether that to Christ.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's go to type 8. Tell me about type 8s. This is one I don't really, I know the type 8, but I don't really know what they would do about goals. So I'd love to hear it.
So type 8s are very rare. You don't meet a lot of type 8s, especially women type 8s. Having said that, type 8s are incredible leaders. They are, talk about a Christian woman leader. It's going to be your type 8. They are amazing. So the type 8s, when they're healthy, they reflect God's love of justice. When they're unhealthy, they want to take charge. They want to be in control. They are all about being strong. They feel like if they show weakness, that you will take advantage of that, and they will push you away. In one Enneagram book I read, it talked about they're kind of like a bull in a china shop. Like they just they're forceful and they're like bulldozers. Like they will go and they will go and they do not give up, which in certain cases is what's needed. You need an advocate. You need someone saying, that's not okay. That's not right. We're not putting up with this. So it is very good when it's channeled correctly. So type 8s, again, like the type 5s, are really wonderful at goal setting because they do have so many ideas. Goals help give them clarity. They also approach goals when they do have a goal set. They are 100% in. They do nothing halfway. But again, a type 8, like a type 3, needs to ask themselves, why am I setting this goal? This is a healthy habit for type 8. Why am I setting this goal? Is it just because I want to right an injustice? Which again, those are good things. Or is it something I truly deeply care about that gets me up and gets me motivated? Or is it something I should do because I've seen something and I'm frustrated? So they really need to ask themselves, why am I doing this? And I think another healthy habit for type 8 is just to remember that you're not the ultimate defender of all the people, that God is the ultimate defender. He is your ultimate defender. He is everybody else's ultimate defender. And so I just want type 8s to have the freedom to know that they don't have to fight every battle for
Mm,
every person, because God is there, just like the type 2s. God will meet every need. And for the type 8s, God will right every injustice. It's not going to be today. It's
yeah.
not going to be on this planet. It will be
Mm,
someday. And everything that is wrong will be righted. But it's not up to the type 8 to do it.
yeah.
So
Okay.
go in grace
So
and peace, type 8s.
would you say that a type 8 might be the type to get, because they care about justice, they care about things being right
Mhm.
and people not being hurt?
Mhm.
Would they tend to just get really riled up about something and want to take that on as a goal, like you said, and then maybe it's not actually something that they're called to or something that God has for them right then, and they struggle with letting go of that goal?
Yes, that 100%
Okay.
can happen, where
Okay.
they see something that is not right and they'll take it on. And in that way, they are incredibly generous people. They see something that isn't okay and they are so willing to give of their time. But again, bringing that back to Christ, is this something you have me to do? Am I just doing this because I made it up to do? Or is this a specific role you need me to fit
Yeah.
right now? And I think type 8s, again, they're incredible leaders. They also don't do well with goals given to them from on high, because they want, especially if you're an 8 with a 7 wing, you want the freedom to set your own goal.
Yeah.
And so if a goal is thrust upon you, they will push back. I mean, type 8s, they're called the challengers for a reason. They will
Yeah.
push back if they don't believe in something, which
Yeah.
again, if you're a boss of a type 8, that can be super frustrating because
Yeah.
sometimes there are corporate goals that need to be met. And your type 8 is the one more likely to challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've read that type 7, 8 wings or 8 with a 7 wing tend to be people that either start their own business or, are the boss
Yes,
because they
yes,
don't want to be boxed into someone else's, ways of doing things.
yes,
So,
yes. Oh, 100% true.
yeah. Okay, so lastly, we have type 9, and I happen to be married to a type 9, so I'm
Oh.
super curious to know what what do type 9s think about goals and how can they approach goals?
So sweet, type 9s. Okay, type 9s are the peacemakers. When they're healthy, they reflect God's peace. And when they are unhealthy, they are self forgetful, kind of like the type 2s. It is incredibly, incredibly hard for a type 9 to set a goal. So, Esther, when I'm done explaining this, I'd love to hear if you feel like this is accurate for the
Yeah.
type 9 in your life. Um, so type 9s, because they value harmony and unity so much, they feel like the only way they can be connected to other people is to not rock the boat. And they don't rock the boat by stuffing down their feelings, their dreams, their longings, their sadness, any emotion that they think might rock the boat. They stuff it down, quote unquote, to keep the peace, to keep everybody happy, to keep the boat moving forward. They'll just swallow it so the project can move on.
Yeah.
And so if you were to ask a type 9, okay, well, what's a goal or two that you have for this year? They would say, I don't know, because they don't know what their dreams, desires, longings, passions are, because they either attach themselves to someone else's goal, dream, vision, idea, or they have buried theirs so deeply that they have no idea how to access it. So I think and again, we're talking unhealthy when you're out of step
Yeah.
with Christ and kind of your default natural setting. And this is, so it's not true for every type 9. But I think, so my husband is a 1 wing 9, so he's very much a peacemaker, and he talks all about pushing the ball under the water. And I'm like, but at some point that pops up, right? And it does. And for the type 9, and they will find this shocking, for the type 9, when they finally pushed everything down far enough and they can't hold it down anymore, it erupts to various levels according to personality and upbringing and situation. Um, but it erupts into anger
Yeah.
and they get really mad. And people around them are like, what is happening? Like, you've always been so calm and easygoing. And they're like icebergs. We're like, there's a part of them above the water and there's so much underneath. And they just have a very hard time expressing what their goals are. Having said that, when nines are healthy, they can set incredible goals and they are so motivated to meet them, and they will have a process and they will have a plan and they will accomplish that goal. But before they can do that, and this is a healthy habit for type 9, before they can do that, they need to figure out what they want. And that's really hard because they feel like they're being selfish. They feel like they don't even know where to start. They're not sure what they want because they're just, they don't care. Like, whatever. Like, you want to go here for dinner? Awesome. Let's go there for dinner. I don't really care. And that's a dinner example.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're talking dreams and your life, and they don't know where to go because they're not really sure. So I think for the type 9, start with figuring out what you want, and you start that. And I know S.J. Meeson talked about this in her interview with you about just spending time with Christ. Like, she talked about you asked her, what tool do you use to figure out how you're wired? And it was, I spend time with Christ. I think for the type 9s, that is incredibly important wisdom there.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know who you are, well, guess who does? The one who made you, the one who knew you before the beginning of time. He knows. He'll help you. He's got all the answers, and he would love to share them with you. So I think type 9s need to start out spending a lot of time with God and in solitude and in silence and just listening. And I think also type 9s, again, because they so want everybody else to be the star, they tend to be your behind the scenes folks, to remember that just like God gave Esther, a type 1, or Jill, a type 3, or Holly, a type 4, gifts and talents, he gave you, the type 9, gifts and talents, not to be hidden, but to be revealed, because God needs what you have out in the world. So let's make this the year where what you want and who you are gets to shine. So, but you live with the type 9.
Yeah.
So does any of that sound familiar or resonate on a level?
Yeah. I think, and we talked about this, I think, on our marriage episode when Scott joined me and Zach and Holly for the conversation, and we talked a little bit about this. But I think that for a long time, Scott didn't express what he wanted, probably partly because he didn't know, and then partly because I was so strong in what I wanted,
right?
that he just went along with what I wanted until, like you said, when they get to the point where they're so frustrated with doing what everybody else wants, they finally realize, oh, that wasn't actually what I wanted.
Right.
So I would say I agree. I think that my type 9 has struggled with figuring out what he truly wants. And because what he does want is everybody to be happy and everybody to get along, and for there to be peace and harmony. And then I think the other thing that I would think about for type 9s in terms of goal setting is that sometimes they struggle with momentum. So with just getting going on something. And so for a type 9, if they set a goal, and if it's a big goal, they might struggle with that because it takes a lot of effort to get the ball rolling. Once the ball is rolling, they can stick with it, and they're very consistent, very steady people. They are very loyal and faithful. But sometimes it's just that initial effort of, okay, this is like a big thing to do. So one thought I might have, and something I think my husband has used, is, breaking it down into like a really small step of like, okay, for working out, for example, we've talked about working out, and sometimes we talk about, okay, he wants to work out more. And sometimes he just has to say, I'm just going to do 10 push-ups or something really simple instead of I'm going to go work out for 45 minutes. It's like, I'm going to do something really, really small. And if that's all I do today, I don't care. That's it. And hey, that works, so you have to know, if you're a type 9, like, don't overload yourself with 15 goals that are extravagant, because you're probably going to struggle with that.
Yes. And I think you're so right. My friends who are type 9, they talk about how they struggle with inertia. Like, it's just easier to stay where they are than
Mm,
to get that momentum to push them toward achieving that goal. And if you know, okay, I'm going to do 10 push-ups today. Well, that builds momentum, because maybe when you're done with those 10 push-ups, you're like, well, I'm going to do 10 sit-ups. Okay, well, now I'm going to do 10 chin-ups. And
yeah.
next thing you know, you've done 30 things and you
Yeah.
started out doing 10 because it built on itself. And or maybe it's I do 10 push-ups today and tomorrow I do 10 push-ups and 10 sit-ups, because that didn't seem too bad. And I
Right.
think that's very wise advice, to just break it down smaller
Yeah.
chunks.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so Jill, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us about this whole idea of how our personalities affect our goal setting and through the lens of the Enneagram. I think this is super helpful. And hopefully, for you listening, you are able to know and identify which type you are. And again, if you don't know, go back and listen to episode 17, and we have some resources you can read. And it's, I always like to mention that it's not just about taking a test
Right. Yes.
with the Enneagram, right? You need to do a little bit of inner work to figure
Mhm.
out what type you are, and it's not just a quick and easy answer all the time. But once we know what type we are, then I feel like we can approach this whole concept of goal setting with a more informed mindset, and be more prepared to actually go into the year with a way that we can serve God and we can honor Christ with our gifts and our talents effectively. So, as we wrap up, Jill, is there anything else you'd like to share? Any other words of wisdom when it comes to goal setting, regardless of our personality type? I'd love to just give you a chance if there's anything else you want to share.
I think for any of the listeners out there who maybe have not set a word of the year or a resolution or a goal, to just give yourself a lot of grace, because God will reveal to you what you're supposed to do when He's ready to reveal it to you and when you're ready to hear it.
Mm,
So I would just say, if you're feeling overwhelmed and sort of stressed out about, I'm hearing so much about goals and planning for the year and I don't know what to do with all of this, like, it is okay.
yeah.
And you, Esther, have talked about this before, about just trusting where you are. Trusting that God has put you in the place with the people He's put you in this time period He's put you in for such a time as this. And I think if you can embrace how God has wired you, knowing there's no default, or there's no, He didn't make a mistake. Like,
Yeah.
you're wired how you are wired for a reason. And to embrace that, and then to give it back to Him and say, where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? And it may look totally different than anything you have planned in your head. But that's why we worship a God who does more than we could ever ask or imagine. And I am just so thankful that He wired us all differently, because if we were all type ones, it would be crazy. If we were
Yeah.
all type 9s, it would be crazy. And so He's given us different people in our lives with different personality types, not to overwhelm us, not to make us feel burdened, but to bring all of that to Him. So
Mm,
that's what I would say.
yes.
Give
Okay.
yourself grace.
So much grace. And Holly and I kind of talked about this too on one of the episodes. I think it was 26. But there's nothing necessarily magical or special about the new year and the beginning of the year. So you may be listening to this episode in January, or you might be listening in July or
Yes.
November. I think, and if you're listening in January and you are feeling that pressure of, oh my goodness, I haven't set my goals, I haven't set my intentions, all these things. I was in a group the other day and someone was sharing about a challenge they were having in their personal life. And then another person chimed in and shared some things that were happening. And they were just tragic, life altering situations. And it was like, who cares about your goals right now?
Right.
Like, just
Right.
be with your family, grieve, go through this. There's
Yes.
things in our lives that are more important
Yes.
than all of this. And so I 100% agree with grace and not feeling the pressure to come up with the perfect solution right now for the goals. But with that being said, I do want to mention, if you are in a place where you want to get clear on your goals for the year and you want to have a purposeful year, you want to really be able to accomplish some purposeful things in your leadership in your life this year. I want to let you know that I'm offering a free workshop. And right now, what I'm calling it is 3 strategies to accomplishing your goals and creating a purposeful year. And so you can sign up for that when you head over to the show notes at estherlittlefield.com/episode 29. You'll see the information there, and go ahead and sign up for that workshop. Even if you listen to this later on, I hope to still make this workshop available, or something similar available for you, even if it's not in January. So head over there and find out how to get in on the workshop so that we can talk about some specific strategies that I use. And again, I will try to take into account the different personality types and how we go about things. But I want to share some of the things that I've learned that have helped me to be able to accomplish some goals and also keep it within the purpose and the overall mission of what I feel like God has given me for my life. So I want to invite you to do that. And Jill, again, I want to thank you for jumping on to our podcast today and sharing your thoughts. Can you just tell everybody where they can find you if they want to connect more and learn more about you?
Sure. You can find me at my blog at jillemccormick.com and on Facebook and Instagram at the handle at Jill E. McCormick. Because I'm not tricky. I got to keep it simple. It's my name. Everything's my name because I'm not tricky.
That's awesome. And the nice thing is that Instagram didn't make it hard for you, because I tried to do my same name and I had to add my middle initial, and I don't have my middle initial on Facebook or on my website. So anyway, sometimes these places don't agree with you, but
I know, right?
I'm glad they did for you. So we'll put the links to Jill's website and her social media in the show notes. So again, hop on over and connect with her and say hi. If you love the Enneagram, you will find some great resources on her blog about that too. So thank you, Jill, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks for joining us on the Christian Women Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, come and join us in our private Facebook community. We would love to get to know you better so that we can make sure the podcast is providing what you need. Plus, you can share your questions and ideas, and you'll be surrounded by incredible Christian women leaders. To join the group, visit estherlittlefield.com/group. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.